Hello everyone and welcome to the Student Game Expo. This event is hosted by Orbis Leadership and Management and is aimed to exhibit games made by students in the game design bachelor's as well as master's programs at Full Sail University. I am Deep Karya, one of the producers at Orbis, and I'm going to be the host for tonight's Student Game Expo. If you're watching live, you can type out any questions you have in chat or in the Student Game Expo Discord server at the link in the corner of the stream. Today we are going to showcase a game called Tales of Logi from Pulse Studio. TJ will be the person representing the game, and you can ask any questions related to the game. So, TJ, can you explain us the game?
Yes, so Tales of Logi is a text-based RPG. It kind of mixes a visual novel, choose your own adventure style game, but it gives it a few light RPG elements. So the game is primarily focused on the story, but one additional feature that we have to make it a little more unique is that we're also implementing the option to play some of the events that happen in the story in a card-based style battle. Now, again, these card style battles are completely optional and the focus is on the story itself, but having that just be an option helps to open up different opportunities for the player. So they could just read it like a visual novel and make choices, or they can do something a little more interactive. Without further ado, I will get right into it unless anyone has a question.
Okay,
Yep.
we can begin the gameplay.
Okay. So, welcome to Tales of Logi. You play as Logi, a man on a quest to conquer the dark power within him. The actions you choose will choose the outcome of Logi's life. Will you learn to control the power within you, or lose yourself to the darkness within? Are you ready to play the game?
We are ever ready.
The story starts out with Biff and Logi in the forest. The two have just defeated 20 soldiers and decide to take a quick break before heading back to their home near Mir. Biff notices a red light coming from a nearby cave. He seeks a glowing rock in the center of the cave, and he approaches the rock and picks it up. Black and red aura starts to take over him, and Logi hears his friend screams and run to him. Once Loki has found his friend, he sees that he's been taken over by chaotic powers. Biff notices Logi and attacks him with the same power that's infecting him, leaving Logi on the ground as chaos enters him, blackening him out. Once Loki wakes up, he sees that he is alone and his arm is covered in dark spots. Loki rises to his feet and looks around to find that he is alone in the cave. Grabs his arm in pain, grabs his sword, and cave. He doesn't really remember why he was in there or who he really is. He begins walking down a nearby path to try and find a place where he could get his arm treated. He sees a town at a distance and sighs in relief that he'll be able to get help. As he's walking, four men appear out of nowhere and demand that he hands over his weapons, armor, and money. Badly hurt, Loki grips his arm and sears at the men. So here, you have the option to A, kill all of them, tell them to leave you alone, or just kill the nearest person. Now, as I mentioned before, we have this optional card based battle that we are going to implement. It's not fully implemented, but I'll show you what we have so far. So, ideally, in this center part here, there will be a button that says Visualize Experience as Card Battle when this panel shows up. At that point, the card game overlay here appears. And for this specific battle, we have Logi here in the player area and four different enemy combatants. Now, let's begin the card game, shall we? So, you might be wondering what a lot of this is going on, and I do admit it's a little bit of much going on, but it is still in a development. So, as you see here, our story choices are the ones that were on that previous scene where we have the option to kill all of them, warn them to leave you alone, or just kill the nearest person. To achieve these options, you would either defeat all the enemies, play 3 avoid cards, which are still being worked on, or defeat one enemy, then play 3 avoid cards. As for the actual combat, you see that we have this heart here representing our health, and it is connected to this health here, as well as some armor. How it works is that you can deal damage and it'll only affect the armor at first, but if there is no armor, regardless of how much damage it would do to the heart, it only does 1 damage to the heart. Um in addition, you see these panels here showcase the enemy's actions. So I am going to be getting attacked a lot. So if I decrease their defense for 1 turn, now I take a lot less damage, and might as well also increase my armor. And if I did need a heart, I would also gain 1 from here. And look at that, I can deal an additional 3 damage. Now, these cards will in the future take stamina, but for now, for testing purposes, nothing. You can use them unlimitedly. So let me end my turn, and the enemy will begin to do their actions. So represented here is a debuff to my defense. So any block cards that I use would be minus this number, and my strength represents my attack. So any of my attacking cards is -2 currently. However, since I am on the evil path and want to go more down the evil path, I want to use the darkness within me. Now, this card is a little bit overpowered, and it is that way for a purpose. It's supposed to give the player a reason to use the darkness within if they want to. So it will buff my attack, deal damage to all enemies, and draw 3 cards for me. Now that I have that buff, let me increase my attack even more. I'm going to use this card to deal damage and draw a card. And do the same thing again and eliminate that enemy. Now this will repeat until all enemies are defeated and I achieve this option. Or if the avoid cards were working, since I killed 1 person, I could play 3 avoid cards, and at that point it would end the card battle. Now, again, this is still all in testing, so that doesn't actually happen right now. As you saw before, I didn't actually uh, click on initiate card battle, and this is still just in testing. So for now, let me just pretend that I actually defeated all enemies, and we will go with the option to kill all of them. Rage begins to build up within you, and you feel your arm begin to throb. A dark aura begins to come from your arm, and you begin to transform into a wolf covered in armor. The men before you scream in fear and begin to run in the other direction. You swiftly claw 2 of the men down and finish off another with your sword, cutting him in half. One man continues to run for his life when he hears you let out a loud howl. The man runs until he finds a tree to hide behind, and after your howl, you jump into the trees and strike the man from above. What do you do next? Let me take it out to the other people here. What do you want to do next? Do you want to get his attention, kill him, or scare him?
Okay, so we don't want to go on the more evil side, I would say.
You don't want
Then,
to go on the more evil side,
yeah, we might scare him.
so you want to scare him. All
Yeah.
right, let's scare him. You jump down and growl in his face. He throws some type of liquid in your face, stabs you in the chest with a dagger, and takes off running. You howl in pain as you fall to your knees. You pull the dagger out, and that dark aura that once covered you begin to form back around you. You begin turning back into a human. You crawl and lean your back up against a tree while trying to catch your breath. The dark aura begins to form around your wound, You eventually lose consciousness and pass out. Later, you awaken while the sun is still high in the sky and notice that your wound was bandaged up. You stand and begin looking around to see if anyone's around, but there's no one present. You still feel the pain, but you don't see any blood on the bandage. You begin removing the bandage and notice the dark aura now fills the area where you were stabbed. You apply the bandage back and take up your sword and continue heading to the town you were going to. Now, at this point, this concludes one event, and you notice I did forget to mention one other detail about our game is that it's broken up into different segments of morning, afternoon, and night. And this was just one specific event that could happen, but the events during your story are randomized based off of what your current alignment is. So right now we're neutral, and when you're neutral, you're able to obtain random events of the neutral category, evil category, or light category. For the purposes of this demo, I've kept it to just the evil path for this story. But now we shift to the afternoon. Currently, I have taken out the other stories just so that I didn't have any mistakes or bugs show up while presenting. But ideally, when you hit this explore more button, it would trigger another random event. If we were on the evil path and stuck down the evil path, the only random events we would come across are just the neutral or evil versions. And if we were on the light path, light or neutral. Um, Talking to people in town also has the benefit of triggering potential of specific events. So whereas the explore is just random, when you talk to someone in town, you learn some piece of information that could potentially trigger another event later on. And one thing that does work for the purposes of this demo is camping for the night, so that we go to our night scene. And if you notice, our stamina actually regains a little bit when we uh, camp for the night. In addition to health, I did forget to mention our stamina is there to kind of keep track of what we can do. Different options take stamina, and if you run out of stamina, then you will end up passing out and going to the next time of day. And at that point, it there is a potential to get a game over, but it is not guaranteed. Um, and now because this is just a demo, we're just going this. The only thing I'm left to do is cycle through the days just to showcase that this is how it will work. Um, in addition, one thing that we're working on is that at night you'll be able to enter the shop. In the shop, will actually have different items that can affect stamina, your health, your alignment, or even cards for the card game battle if you are more leaning towards playing the events as a card game. Now, I can end this here for now, but you might be wondering what might have happened if we didn't scare the guy. So, if you would like, we can go down that path, or uh, if you don't even want to kill all of them, we can go back here and see how things may have turned out differently.
Sure, we can explore more of the path, so we shall tell them to leave you alone.
All right, we'll tell them to leave you alone. Let me, because I didn't do this the first time, do keep track of what's going on up here, because we have 4 health now, but when we tell them to leave you alone, we took damage for that. You warn the men to leave you alone and go about their day. The men begin to laugh and surround you. You draw your sword and take a fighting stance. One lunges at you and tries to stab you with a dagger. You punch him in the face, however, another guy runs up and stabs you in the back. You quickly turn around and cut him in half, but right as you kill him, your arm throbs in pain and a dark aura begins to surround and cover you. You begin to transform into a wolf covered in armor. The three men scream in fear and begin taking off running. You quickly kill two of the men by clawing them down, and you let out a loud howl that could be heard from miles away. The man who got away quickly finds a tree to run behind, and you run and track him down. You don't see him, but you can smell exactly where he is. What do you do next? Kill him? Follow the scents? Or approach him?
We would approach him.
Let's approach him. As you approach the man, you slowly walk to him. He moves from behind a tree and takes off running. You chase him and attempt to claw his head off when he ducks and rolls out of the way. He sprints just to the opening of the three lines of trees, and when you manage to claw right through his back, the man lets out a scream just before you take off his head. You appear to be stuck in your wolf form right now. However, you don't dislike this feeling of power. Now, this is important because certain things in the background, such as if you are currently in your wolf form or not, will determine what events you can trigger. So, if you go on to the next part of the story and you are in your wolf form, you will be locked out of certain events that could happen if you were in your human form. So the story, as you saw, still kind of rebounded where you ended up killing the man, but there are versions of the are parts of the story where he survives, and whether or not he survives depends on which random events can trigger as well. So the story seems familiar, but during each playthrough, once we have the events actually being randomized, you'll find that not everything exactly happens the way it happened the first time. I'm only explaining this because as I hit continue, we now shift back into that afternoon scene and the camp for night and the sleep for morning. Um, but as I mentioned, there are more paths to go down, but I think seeing two for now is good enough, unless you want to see more. Otherwise, I think I can open up the floor to any questions that anyone might have about the game.
We can open up to questions now
All right, that
because
sounds good.
okay. So what gave you the inspiration to create such a game?
So me and my team actually were throwing out the ideas of what game we should make, and then we really brought it up to our artists to say what kind of art you are most familiar with. And after seeing his work and seeing this line style drawing like this that looks absolutely amazing, we're like, we decided, why don't we focus our game around the art that our artist is making and make something more of a visual novel type experience, since we can use this style of art and have it really excel. And the tail the tales of Logi aspect came from just us tossing around ideas, tossing around talking about whether or not we want one character, multiple characters, if what time and place it's going to take place, if there's magic or anything involved. And it just was a really um a team process that kind of came together with us just throwing out ideas and people saying, "Oh, I like that, but what if we added this to it?" And because the story is split into light, neutral, and evil, um, the path that the player may take actually can vary very differently. So again, for the purpose of this demo, I kept it with the dark opening, but at the beginning, that's only a random chance. Whether you'll start with the dark opening, the neutral opening, or the light opening.
Uh, Concept of implementing a card game in a visual novel is very good. There aren't any games as such. So, how did you stumble upon the idea of integrating a card game into a visual novel game?
So it's actually pretty funny that for we were scheduled to make this game within 4 weeks, and by the end, look, not even the end of the second week, the programming background part for most of the visual novel had already been coded, and we were actually um, we actually were talking with people, our advisor, and the advisor suggested that to increase the scope of our game, and potentially we were throwing out things that we could do, and they said perhaps like a mini game, like a card mini game or something like that, and we really sparked with that idea and thought like, well, why do we have to leave it as a mini game? Like, sure, we'll keep it optional because the focus is the visual novel itself, but do why just stop at making it something small and insignificant when we can actually make it integrate it more closely to the visual novel. And again, because the focus was the story aspect, the card game portion is still going to be completely optional. But with that, we also saw that we can integrate so many different things. Like if we like, depending on the path the player goes down, they can actually get different cards depending on what they've interacted with. If they were to pick up a certain weapon, that could change their deck or add cards to their deck. Like we saw these opportunities as limitless and had to go for it.
That sounds good. So again, coming to your team, how huge is your team?
So our team currently is 5 members. We have one artist, one programmer, and 3 level designers. Really.
And how did you distribute the tasks among each team member?
So we decided to split it kind of based off of everyone's talents. And so for the game designers, we actually had each, since we had 3 designers, we decided that we would split the story 3 ways like that, with the light, neutral, and evil. So the 3 designers are each taking a different path of how Logi will expand. Our artist is primarily focusing on drawing art. He has done a few more pieces, but I we our focus was on the endings that we have already pre-written, and I wouldn't want to spoil those images yet. So that's something that that's the reason why you've only seen the 3 images so far, but there have been more. There are 5 potential endings that the player can get, and as the programmer, I have been working on implementing all the backend systems, trying to make sure that things like that the game is playable in both the card game format as well as the visual novel aspect.
Okay. What challenges did you encounter during the whole development process until now?
You said what was one problem that we faced?
Yeah, any challenges or problems?
One challenge I will say is just trying to find a good middle ground between everyone's ideas with the story. Like we still have it so the story varied because of branching structure with the light, neutral, or evil paths. But there was some challenges deciding on whether we were going to really use third person for the story or first person for the story, and how we were really going to break up the story, since we want to keep things a little bit randomized for replayability versus just making an outright story. So there was some creative differences there a little bit, but ultimately we um, discussed as a group. People made their arguments for why we should do X over Y, and at the end of the day, we all kind of came together and agreed on a format that we all could be happy of.
Okay. And what was the best part about the whole development process you liked?
Personally, because I'm the programmer, I would say that actually working on this visual novel was like programming everything was really the highlight for me. I know that's a little nerdy, but I like code, and I haven't made a visual novel before, especially one like this with RPG mechanics. So it was really eye opening to really see what the possibilities was there. I even messed around with some things such as like flexibility and stuff like that. So one thing I could show off is like one thing I've in the past before when working with Unity, I've had problems where changing the resolution completely changed like your panels and stuff like that you had. But um, while working on this game, I was looking up things and I actually was able to make it reflects flexible so that everything changes depending on your screen width and height, which helps because one of our stretch goals, if we have the time, is to try and put this on mobile if possible. And already having the screen be flexible for that helps us immensely.
Okay, so uh, if the audience has any questions, they can ask in the Discord or the stream. So considering that you guys are still students, how did you manage the time between developing the game as well as your classes?
Well, I'm gonna tell you right now that time management is hard regardless of where you go. And really, since the structure of our game was designed in such a way that people could work on it independently, what we did is we scheduled certain times that we were going to meet as a group. And other than that, it was up to the individual to try and schedule out that time. Um, and really, we just kept an open line of communication. Some people did message during time saying that they really needed to finish some classwork and couldn't work on it, and we know that we know that that happens. We are all in class. We all have different outside issues we have to work with too, dealing with life and stuff. So just as long as we were open and honest and said that we were working on X assignment for and we didn't get a chance to work on it, that was good enough. Just letting everyone know.
Okay. And how would you describe your experience of working on a game in a virtual environment, considering the pandemic situation?
Honestly, it's for me. It really wasn't all that bad. The only main issue, obviously, is like trying to meet and stuff like that. We of course have Discord that we use, but making sure that everyone's able to attend, and sometimes people have to mute themselves for a bit because family members or something came out. So it's definitely different, but not as different as I was expecting, really.
Okay, we have a question from the audience. I don't know how to pronounce the username, but Fuizian, sorry to chop off your name. For the question is for the based portion of the game. Did you take inspiration from other games that had the same mechanics?
Yes. So actually, I I've taken a bit from three main sources to try and like just how I want. wanted things. So if I were to start this back up, and I uh, put this back on, um, I will explain that the first main source was Hearthstone. So, like, one card game that I really like to play is Hearthstone, and how some of the like small mechanics, such as just like how I hover over the card and it enlarges, is something that I really got from Hearthstone playing that. And eventually we would like to do the also some of the other effects, such as when you're dragging it changing to a reticle instead of the card. But that's something that if it's not in, it's not going to break our game. um the other one is Slay the Spire. So since there is a randomness aspect to it, it this one thing I didn't mention is that our the deck reshuffles after you exhaust everything, like a deck builder style game like Slay the Spire, and you, depending on the path you go down, you do collect different cards that are added to your deck. So it really adds kind of like I a deck building concept without the choice of the player actually getting to really choose which card to pick. And then the Shield and Heart idea actually came from Little Town Hero, that strategy game by Game Freak, which is not exactly a card game, but it should be really. It kind of works like one, where they actually have this mechanic where you have armor protecting your health, and no matter how much damage you would do to your heart, it only counts as one, but any damage to the armor itself actually counts against that armor. um so yes, to put it simply, Hearthstone, Slay the Spire, and Little Town Hero were the three main inspirations for this card game.
Great. And like during the development, did there come any instances where you planned something but it didn't go that way?
um So again, kind of just when we were uh still had some creative differences, I would say that everyone had made their own kind of plans of how the story was going to go, or how the gameplay was going to go. Again, we kind of worked a little independently when we weren't meeting as a group. So when we met as a group to kind of discuss our options, some people had ideas that they wanted in, and others that contradicted others. And so really, like I said earlier, we just kind of talked it out and tried to see what best was possible for to make the game the way that we wanted to make the game.
Okay. So, any more questions from the audience or the viewers? So, since we don't have any more questions, this concludes today's Student Game Expo. Thanks for presenting your game, TJ. We can continue the conversation about the game in Discord server later on. And thanks to the team for showing us your game, as well as to the people who have attended our stream. And goodbye and have a great night.
All right. Thank you as well. Have a great night.